Howdy, partner. Welcome to one of the most northern parts of the United States of America. Travel with me upriver as we talk to a bunch of ladies and fellers and they share their tales of wit and wisdom. That's right, it's time again for Skagit Storytellers.
With Liz Duffy. Welcome, Cheryl. You're definitely the one that people talk to me the most about. They don't even say, "Hey Liz, I listened to your podcast." They run up to me and go, "When's part 2 with Cheryl?" And they like grab me and I go, I don't know. We haven't set a date yet, or it's coming out in March or whatever. And so I just thought that was really interesting that's like the number one that people mention to me. And again, not that they've listened to it. They grab me and beg me, when is the next one? You got to have her on again. I go, I know. We're going to talk about it. Aww. So we recorded in, now correct me if I'm wrong, was this December of 2023?
It was December or January, somewhere.
We had talked about your past and all the things that you've been through, and we didn't get to everything. Mm-hmm. But then I thought, my gosh, though, it's been a year. You could probably fill an hour with what you've gone through this year. I know I could. I'm sure. So I'm like, oh Lord. So I already know there might be a part 3, and that's okay. People will run up to me and go, "When's Cheryl's part 3?" Yeah. So I was thinking, I'm like, oh gosh, where do we even start off? Because we had ended on a pretty deep, traumatic event. Yeah. In your last one, it was Evan. Mm-hmm. And I think I have a sticker right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Aww. I actually have a few of your stickers smattered around. I think this is one of yours too. It's the state with the owls. Yep. And then I think I have the, remind me again your ex-husband's name.
Scott.
I think Scott's billiard ball is over there somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So nice. I love walking through my house and just kind of like the posters, like just seeing reminders of my friends or music, or I'll see like this sticker and think of you. So thank you. Yeah. So had you thought about how we should start this? I mean, what are you thinking when you were driving over here?
I was trying to listen to the old one, so I remembered what I said before.
Part 2. I don't know. Yeah. It's so weird to start this way because I know we also don't have a ton of time. Let's just see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah. I mean, grief has been a big part of my life the last few years, and so much that I'm quitting construction. I did already, and I am next fall or winter, as soon as I can figure it out. I'm going to grad school for grief counseling, and so yeah, it is. I've just wanted to do something that feels like it matters more than what I was doing. And I mean, I've also fallen in love again. And so there's, and that's a different kind of growth that is, it's hard to put words to sometimes, but, yeah, I wouldn't mind sharing about Scott and the others. I mean, it was a big part of what's happened in my life.
I guess let's begin with, tell me more about Scott. We had scratched the surface of your marriage with Scott and your relationship and, some things that you guys struggled with. And I believe he had passed away. Was it from COVID?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. This was, he went into the hospital April 28th, 2021. So that was the Delta variant. The things had briefly opened up that summer to where people were going out and going in to bars and things again. And he was I think I mentioned before, he was a pool player and competed in the BCA leagues and whatnot. And most likely the Elks Lodge where they played is where he got sick. Not that you can absolutely trace it, but the signs point to that. Yeah. And we had been through, I don't remember where we stopped with the whole divorce story, but
I was curious at what point, like, where were you guys at in your relationship at that point?
So we had been through a pretty rough couple of years. He had a girlfriend who, some of this is kind of sensitive because of my daughter. So, but I don't know how to tell the story without going all the way into it.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's just tell it and then we'll go back and
yeah.
kind of think about how we can piece it.
It was, this person had been my friend originally, and I loved when she started dating Scott, because it was the first time he had a girlfriend that actually liked me, and we were doing things as a whole big family, like, having our kids' birthday parties together again. And, cause some of his girlfriends didn't care for proximity. For a lot of our divorce, we lived on the same property. Because we kept ownership of it together, so we didn't have to lose. And we had different living spaces, so he could live in part and I could live in part. And I think I mentioned before, when I came back from the PCT, I moved into the mother-in-law cottage, and I was there until early 2020. It was getting to where the kids were getting older, and having a 1-bedroom cottage wasn't working out so well. But he had decided that he was done taking care of the house. Ever since our divorce, we had kind of gone back and forth with, you're going to buy me out and you're going to stay here. No, you are. No, you, and we did try to sell it at one point, and didn't sell it, which I'm really glad about now. But there was all this back and forth, and even though it did get contentious at times, it was, we really wanted to work through things in a way that was best for the kids and for each other. And so he had decided he was done owning it, and now I would take over. And the woman that he was dating had been abusive to my children, some pretty extreme psychological abuse, specifically to my daughter. And there was something that happened the day before Luna's birthday, in January, where she really showed her true colors in a way that both my daughter and Scott saw. And it became a dangerous legal situation for him, where I came in and stood up for him. And I know he had been afraid, because this woman was trying to pit them against me and me against them. And people who work like that, their power is in secrecy. And, she called me one night and said, Scott's about to be arrested. You need to go get your kids. And I listened to her story, and none of it added up. No matter how contentious things ever were between him and I know who he was. And none of it made sense, what she was saying. So even though he had moved off the property and was living in a rental at this point, so we're talking early 2020, January though, before COVID was really a word that anybody knew. And I called my sister, and she was like, we have to go help him. And we drove out to his house, and I know he was worried when we showed up at the door, because she had been saying that I was on her side, and that's what she had tried to do with calling me. And thinking that it would be something that made me happy that he was getting in trouble. And there was an altercation between her and her ex-husband, who really wasn't her ex-husband. She had been kind of playing the two of them.
Oh.
And so that altercation is what she had called the police about, when it was really something where Scott was defending himself. And so my sister and I showed up. I talked to the police. I'm his ex-wife, saying, this is what's actually true here. And not because I needed to defend him, not, I did need to show up for him, but I was just telling what was true. And when I showed up, I know I mentioned before, I never stopped loving Scott. I just changed how I loved him. And I've always described it as I have these different compartments in my heart, and there's romantic love and kind of everybody else. And it takes a bit for me to move someone from the romantic compartment into the other one. But once I do, I have never moved one back. He became more like my brother to me. And he was just sometimes the brother I wanted to punch in the face, but he was my family. He was always my family. I'll just say that teenage girl, preteen age, they're so vulnerable to especially other women who influence them. And this particular girlfriend was like fancy and girly and good at makeup and all the things that were intriguing to my daughter. So it really kind of allowed her an in, that she was all the things that I wasn't. And I'm so squirrely with my stories, but I'll just say that since then, my relationship with my daughter is better than it ever has been. We're really close. We've openly talked about all the things that happened and recovered from all of that. But there were times in there where I was like, my daughter hates me and she will always. And we had been really close prior to this too. So,
So you're warning me, if something goes south, it's okay. It's going to come back around.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's where you guys were at. You were like, you're like a brother to me. I care about you. This is not good. I want to help you.
Yeah. And, I helped him with the legal stuff, and he was still dealing with it when he died. And it was expunged, like it was thrown out eventually. But she had claimed that he had assaulted them, and the clincher was breaking and entering felony, where he had lived there and had a key and was going in to get his stuff. And anyway, that would have wrecked his life and been jail time and whatnot. So, his ex-wife standing up for him and being like, he absolutely lived there. I picked my children up from there. Anyway. So after that happened, my daughter's birthday was the next day, and he came over to the house, and the four of us celebrated her birthday. And, we chatted, we talked about, we were very different politically. But we had a really good, lively and friendly conversation, and we were really starting to recover our friendship. And, we did the same for Oliver's birthday the next month. I went out to his house, and just the four of us celebrated our kids' birthdays. It was COVID. It wasn't, we couldn't invite anybody over, everyone was staying separate, but this was a way that, we could do something and make it special. And it was, gosh, I had, just started taking over the house again, and he had kind of gutted the upstairs. I'm living in the cottage. He had moved out of the upstairs, and, I needed to make it livable again so that the kids could have rooms and whatnot. He had kind of gutted the kitchen and all of these things. And meanwhile, we had some tenants in one of our living spaces who were selling drugs out of my house.
Oh no.
And I had to evict them during COVID and gut that place because they were like cutting cocaine there. There was like residue all over the walls. And
wow.
So I had to make it safe to live again. I'm just glad it wasn't something like meth because that would have condemned our house. But it was a friend of mine came over and we had to haul like 7 truck and trailer loads of trash to the dump that they had in there.
Wow.
And so telling that because this was one of my favorite moments with him in our like friendship recovery. He had some good friends who were also living at the house in the downstairs area, and he was there playing pool. I did not know this. And one of the deals was I'm taking over the house. He's going to give me a good deal on a buyout, but he doesn't want to have anything to do with taking care of it ever again. Like he was previously doing all the maintenance and everything like that. And so I was trying, and I had a friend of mine who was there helping me, and we were really trying to crank it out so that my sister could be there. And I do not do construction. I am a designer and a project manager. I do not build things. But I hung this door and I put the lock set in, and I'm inside a bedroom and I shut the door to test the lock set, and I couldn't get it back open. I had no phone. I was like, fuck, I am stuck in here. And my sister was helping me. She'd gone back upstairs. And so I'm just like waiting, okay, like trying to mess with it, see if I could like take it back apart, but I couldn't get it to open. And so my sister eventually comes back in, and I asked her, I don't remember what I asked her. I asked her to go get a screwdriver. I asked her to do something, but what she did was go get Scott because he was there.
He's like, I said I want nothing to do with it.
And at this point I had taken off part of the door handle and you could see through it, but I couldn't get it to unclick. And so he gets down there and he's looking through the keyhole and he goes, "Oh, you got yourself a little problem, do ya?" And he was just teasing me. And of course I like flipped him off through the little keyhole, but he ended up getting me out of there. And then he stuck around for like another hour or two and helped fix everything that I had done wrong. None of which he had to do, but I think for one, it bothered him. And for two, he just was like that. He just wanted to be helpful, you know?
We had talked about how, we look at our exes like, bro, like I still care about you.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you think it's the reverse for guys? Did he look at you like his sister, or do you think that guys don't do that? I'm just curious what you think.
We never talked about it. What I do know is that when I would tell him that I love him, I know, and this was going back a couple years to the last time we had talked about it before this, because I want the people I love to know that I love them. It doesn't matter if they love me back. It doesn't matter if they understand how I love them. But I don't want to die with those words inside me. I want
Tell
the
them,
people.
Make it weird.
Yep.
Do it.
Yep. And I made it weird all the time. And so I think because he was the one who left originally, and I think that he thought that I had never gotten over him. And he told me that one night. There was this same woman had given him something one night, and he was a little bit on the high side.
Freer with the truth.
Yes, freer with the truth. Let's call it that.
You're very truthful tonight.
Yes. And that was the only time he ever admitted the ways that he'd hurt me, he gave me a really beautiful apology. I don't care if he was high. It matters. And when he told me that he thought I wasn't over him, I actually laughed. It was just a spontaneous response because I was like, I don't actually believe that you get over people. For me, like, I moved through that experience and I changed the way that I loved him. And so it wasn't as much a getting over as it was getting through to something different. But why it was funny to me was because I hadn't thought of him romantically in years. Like, to the point where if I didn't know that we had been married and had children, I would have forgotten that we were ever romantic. It was just so far from my mind. But so he was surprised when I laughed at that. But that just is how it works for me.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's the same for anybody else, but that's how it was for me.
So I love that you guys got to that step where I'm just picturing now, like, him looking through the keyhole at you and him making fun of you and you flipping him off. Mm-hmm. At when was that?
So that would have been like late spring, early summer 2021.
Okay, so this is right before he got sick.
Yes, yeah. And what was so great was I had spine surgery in December of 2020. So I was still recovering from that. I had 3 car accidents in 2 years, 2018 or 2019, 2020, all like a year and a month apart. And I had spine surgery. I had all of these injuries. So, talking about like before through hiking, climbing mountains, stuff like this, it was just injury after injury and continuing to try getting back to those things that I love. And with life throwing more and more roadblocks at it. And that July, I was able to do the Tahoe Rim Trail, 200 miles roughly around Lake Tahoe. 200 by the time you do all the like ins and outs. I think the trail itself is maybe 175-ish. And I think during that time, he took the kids to Yellowstone for a long weekend. He just spontaneously drove to Montana and back. And in hindsight, I'm so glad that the kids had that with him, because when they told me, I was like, your dad did that? That's awfully adventurous of him. But yeah, I got to do the Tahoe Trail. Right before that, the first boyfriend that I had ever had after my divorce, Jimmy, he died that June. He was an addict and an alcoholic. My first experience with any of that stuff. And he died from complications related to that, or heart stuff, as people probably prefer to be said. But I'm not calling out his mom here or anything like that, so I think it's fine. And his funeral was during that trail experience, and I chose not to go. But that was just like a thing that happened. And on that trail, I had started it with a good friend of mine and a friend of hers, and they bailed a couple days in. It was, in the 90-degree temperatures, like up in the 90s, and at 9,000 feet of elevation. It was hot, miserable, long water carries. I fucking loved it. It was the closest I had felt to being on the trail again since I was on the trail. And that was also a part that I had skipped when I did it. So the west side of the lake, Desolation Wilderness, is PCT. So, but we started kind of in the northeast corner, if there's a corner of a lake. And we were going clockwise. So when they got off the trail, I just did the rest on my own. And it was, I it had been a long time since I felt that alive. 7 months after spine surgery, carrying a backpack again, it was different. I mean, where I could easily, like relatively speaking, say easily do a 34-mile day. 18 was kind of like my max. I had some nerve damage in my spine surgery. And I call this my left leg, my wonky leg, because it just, I don't have any feeling in the front side of it. So the muscles don't work normally. Have you ever hiked in the Sierras at all?
No.
There's these just huge rock steps where I swear they're made for elephants or something. It's like doing big box steps over and over and over. And I have to use trekking poles and to get this leg to lift me up those steps, I have to use my arms too. So it's a lot slower going than it used to be. But I was out there with a backpack and just felt like more free than I had felt in years. And that was the year that South Lake Tahoe caught on fire. And that fire started like a couple days before I finished the trail, but I was on the north end by then, so I could just see the smoke in the distance. I had the most magical time. And, I had my friends decided to drive back home because we had driven down together, and I had to figure out my own way home or get off the trail. And I was like, I can't get off the trail. I had to finish it. And so, and I know you asked me about Scott. And
No, I was actually going to ask, is it Jimmy?
Jimmy.
Did he pass away and you decided I need to do something to feel joy and alive again? And then you planned the Tahoe hike?
We had it planned.
Was he going to go with you?
Oh, no. I wasn't. He was,
were you not with him when he passed away?
No.
Oh, okay.
Only Evan was I with when they passed away.
Okay.
Jimmy
you dated for a bit.
Right after my divorce.
Which was huge.
Yeah.
And then you guys broke up.
We did. And
he passed away.
He passed away a few years later.
Oh, got it. Okay.
He was my first boyfriend after my marriage. I learned a lot with that. I really thought I was in love with him, and we talked about creating a life together. I learned a lot about drug addiction and alcoholism being with him. We were only together maybe 3 months.
Yeah. But the fact that his funeral was like on, your hike. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of time to process.
So he was on my mind, and I thought about getting off the trail to go show up, but he hadn't been a part of my life for years. I didn't know any of his family. And really, he had honestly been really awful to me. I did get a good apology from him a couple times. He tried to kill himself a handful of times, developed drug-induced schizophrenia, and he was someone that I had to distance myself from, just for, emotional safety.
So then you did your hike, and you said while you were hiking, Scott had taken the kids on a trip to Montana.
Mm-hmm.
And so was it after that trip, did he start to get sick? Because your relationship was in a great spot.
It was, yeah. So I finished that trail, and I got home. The kids and I got sick a couple weeks after that. That was our first time having COVID. And so they hadn't been around Scott at all, because they were with me because I'd been away for 2 weeks. And we got sick. All three of us had been vaccinated, and we were actually headed out to our annual backpacking trip into Stehekin. We were all packed literally on the road. when my sister called me and said that my other sister was in the hospital with COVID. She's had 2 kidney transplants. At the time, I think she'd only had 1. So she's immune compromised, and she was in the hospital for 17 days.
Wow.
And ended up surviving it. I knew Oliver had been around her, so we ordered COVID tests online from Walgreens and pulled into Everett, took a test. He was positive. So we turned around and drove home. None of us were symptomatic, but who knows? You know, there was a lot of unknown about the effects of it. There was some wildfire going on, you know, some smoke, but mostly we didn't want to carry that virus into Stehekin. Do you know Stehekin?
Yeah.
Tiny town, no medical care. That wasn't something we were willing to do. So we turned around and went home, and I tried to fix my bathroom sink for a couple weeks. Oliver didn't really get more than the sniffles. Luna and I had a bit more. But that was, you know, we did the whole 2-week quarantine, and somewhere during that time, Scott needed a backpack from the house, and he came by to grab it. But he stayed down in the yard. We have a kind of 2-story, and we went out to the deck, and Oliver and I did anyway, and we were talking to him. This was before we had any symptoms at all, and just chatting, and, you know, Oliver had a lot to say to his dad, and I remember Scott saying, "Where's Luna?" And Luna was mad at him because he wasn't vaccinated, and she was worried about him. And when I had first gone outside, I was like, "Luna, your dad's here, you want to come out?" And she was like, no, I don't. And when he asked, I went back in and I was like, "Luna, your dad's asking for you. Could you come say hi to him?" And she did. And that was the last time we ever saw him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you said that your sister was immune compromised. Scott wasn't, correct? But he wasn't super healthy.
He was young. He was healthy. He was fit.
Okay. Okay, I'm thinking of someone else. I'm sorry.
Nope. 0 risk factors for
Wow.
him. Just he didn't vaccinate.
Yeah. And you were saying that you guys, you know, were on different political aisles.
Yeah.
So him being on one aisle and also him being very fit, in his mind, he's like, "No,
yeah,
I'm good." Yeah.
I think he kind of had a tendency to think he was invincible too. He was always a risk taker. I remember early on in our dating, his dad was doing like scrap metal hauling and taking down this big oil tower, and Scott took me out there to climb it one time, and I got like part way up and I just started shaking. I was like, "Nope, I cannot do this." And meanwhile, he's off the ladder, like swinging around on the beams. I was like, I always thought he might die young from doing something stupid. I never would have expected that he would die from something like this.
Yeah.
He had been backpacking the weekend before he got sick. And he was the guy that like carried coolers up the mountain, because they went backpacking, like different kind of backpacking than I do. I think it was like 2 or 3 miles or whatever, and they brought coolers and beer and stuff like that. Not ultralight at all. But he had done that the week before, and he had started showing signs of being sick, I guess, when he was out there. And then I remember this was, we had been over our COVID for a while, the kids and I. And we were actually just getting ready to try taking our backpacking trip again. And I remember thinking it was unusual to go a day or 2 without communicating in some form. I talked to him, texted, whatever, most days. And I was like, God, I haven't heard from him in a minute. I wonder what's going on. And I called him, and he just sounded awful. And I remember asking him if it was COVID, and he goes, "It's inconclusive," because he didn't want to hear about it. And I was like, you know, telling him the things that my sister had done. there was like monoclonal antibodies and things like that that people were doing to try to help get over it more quickly. And, nobody knew exactly what to do for COVID. It was still kind of making it up as we go, but these were things that had seemed to be helpful for other people. He ended up going into the hospital a day or two later. He actually overlapped with my sister for a couple days. And he was at St. Joe's. It's all kind of, time is very swirly to me here.
You guys hadn't gone on your Tahican trip, your second attempt yet?
No, we were just getting ready to leave. And when he went into the hospital, we decided to stay just to make sure, everything was okay. And it never even occurred to us that he could die from this. My sister, who was immune compromised, had survived it.
Yeah, and he's fit.
Yeah.
Yep.
We were like, well, if Terry can survive this, it'll take him a week or two maybe to get over it. It'll be fine. And his sister was getting updates from the hospital every day, and we were talking about it. And then my brother-in-law ended up taking over getting the hospital updates. And I ended up, talking, this was Doug, my brother-in-law, who he ended up dying 9 months after. Oh. And not from COVID. He was killed in our office.
Oh my gosh.
In Ferndale. But he was the one who was like staying up every night, researching, trying to figure out what he could, talking to the hospital staff every day. Scott went on a ventilator after being in there for a few days, and which is when it started to feel like a little scarier. But it seemed like he was, like, all of his organs were still strong. Everything was looking as positive as it could, but it's just really hard to tell. But he wasn't getting any better. Doug discovered that some places were having success with an ECMO machine, which is a lung bypass. It's what they use for doing lung transplants, to oxygenate the blood when it can't go through the lungs. So his lungs were so full of fluid and gunk that he couldn't breathe. It was his oxygen had been like in the 80s when he went into the hospital, and it was like in the 70s, 80s, which is not good enough at all. But he really pushed to get Scott on an ECMO, because they were starting to say he's not getting better on the ventilator, is not looking good. And he talked to Harborview or UW, which is where they had an ECMO machine available, and turned out he was a candidate because all of his organs were healthy. So they airlifted him down there. And this was maybe a week or two in. He went in on August 28th and he died on September 28th. So he was part-time in Bellingham, part-time down there. And it started to look promising when he got on the ECMO machine. So he was unconscious. And I'll just back up a little bit, because when he was first on the ventilator, we got a call one day that he had pulled it out.
Oh.
Yeah. They put them on a paralytic.
I'm just picturing a mask. Is it not just a mask?
No, he was intubated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Down your throat. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so unconscious, because they have to be mildly paralyzed to have that breathing tube in. I am not a medical.
And he woke up
person
at some point and took it out?
Well, they were having some trouble turning him, is what they said.
Geez.
So they relaxed the paralytic a little bit to be able to do that. And I guess he woke up enough that he yanked it out, which is not how it's supposed to come out.
What a terrifying feeling if he noticed that and then react. Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm.
So they decided to leave it out for a bit. He was conscious for a little bit of time, and we got to FaceTime with him. and because they weren't letting any visitors in at all. So his sister and her son, who was really close with Scott, me and the kids, we FaceTimed with him, and there was a nurse in there. She had to speak for him because he was so weak and so little breath that he could barely whisper. So he was whispering. She was having to translate what he was saying. But he had been, I think, teaching my nephew how to play the guitar. And so Frankie played the guitar for him a little bit. My daughter showed him some artwork that she was working on. He got to tell the kids that he was proud of them. And he said, I love you guys. I'm not giving up. And, we all got to tell him that we love him. That was the last time he was conscious. Yeah.
So they flew him to, you said down south.
Yeah, he was at UW. I don't know if, I kept hearing Harborview. I don't know if it's the same place or not.
But you were saying it looked promising. However.
So it looked promising. He seemed to be getting better. But then he developed a C. diff infection, which basically he wasn't strong enough to recover from, and his organs slowly shut down. They had him on kidney dialysis. They had him, everything that they could. And there was a morning I was actually in at a medical appointment, and I got out of there and had like 15 missed calls. And they were like, it is only machines keeping him alive now. And so they made an exception for me to take the kids down there. The three of us drove down. My sister drove with us so she could deal with the car. And it was all just so surreal. We hadn't made the decision to turn the machines off, but it was very likely that that's what would be happening. And at the time, so they're letting people in, and only 2, but they let me be with the kids because they're minors. And the only option was to watch through the glass. And, the second I saw him, it was, the air was like blasting into his lungs and making his whole body heave. And he didn't even look like himself anymore. And we weren't together at the time, but I loved that man for 30 years. I knew without a doubt that he would not want to stay that way. And the chances of him ever being able to recover were basically 0. But I could not stand the thought of watching him die through the glass. And I asked every nurse I saw, is it possible? We've all had COVID. We've been vaccinated. And he was still testing positive, so they weren't going to let us in. And I talked to this one nurse. His name was Ben, and I've been meaning for the last 3 years to reach out to UW and thank him. But he kind of took it up the chain to get permission for us to go in. They gave us spacesuits with the little battery packs so that we're breathing that oxygenated air. And they let us go in. And I gotta tell you, I have never heard my son wail like he wailed with his head on his daddy's chest. It was like the most heartbreaking thing. And but it was not an option for either of them to not be there, to not be with him. And there was a really limited amount of time on those battery packs. And the nurses kept asking me, like, they kept, hitting their figurative watch and
Let's go.
And is it time? And I remember I didn't feel like I could make that choice, right? It was
because legally it was your choice.
well, I mean, I don't even know who it was, his sister legally. It was very messy. Yeah. So meanwhile, multiple of his friends were on they had a Zoom call going, and that's how we were, the whole time he was down there, we were able to Zoom with him and talk to him and play music for him. And even though he wasn't conscious and couldn't respond, we talked to him every night. And this last day, like a whole bunch of his friends got on this Zoom call and with his sisters and family, and they were all telling stories and just memories and like laughing and crying. And so this was kind of going on in the background, and we ended up having to shut it off for a bit because the kids needed their privacy. And I remember, and I feel so dumb for saying this to my daughter, but just like, are you ready? And she looked at me like I had said the worst words to her imaginable. And she said, I will never be ready. And that was when I knew that it was going to be up to me. And I'm watching my kids sobbing and holding their dad. His hands were swollen with, because he was on dialysis, like his kidneys weren't functioning. His little like bald spot had grown out a little bit, and he just, it was him, but it wasn't him. Yeah. And he, I don't even think he was in his body anymore. And just to kind of give a little bit of background to, my daughter and I in particular are pretty woo-woo. And, she had a need to know everything that was going on while Oliver didn't during the time he was in the hospital. And she and I would take walks down the driveway every night, and I would tell her so that I wasn't having to, tell her what was going on while, and she's 15, Oliver's 10 at the time. And there was one night where we're walking down the driveway, and we had just come out, and it had been stormy, or I don't know, maybe I don't remember it being stormy, but a huge tree fell right after we had passed under it, like so close that we ran when we heard the noise. And she had been having dreams about Scott. I had this dream that I clearly misinterpreted, but it was, his habit had been to, when we exchanged kids, he would come pick them up from the house, because I had them every day for COVID school, and on his days he would drop them off in the morning and then pick them up at the end of the day. And while they were getting ready, he'd sit in his truck and I would go down and chat with him. And in my dream, he was just sitting in his truck waiting for the kids. It was like this really kind of peaceful thing. And I was like, okay, he's just, waiting till he can see them again. He's going to be back. And I, who knows what that meant, but like he was showing up in my dreams. He was showing up in Luna's dreams. And I just really don't think that he was even in his body anymore at that point. Maybe near it. He was in the room, but he wasn't in it. And I eventually had to make eye contact with that doctor and nod my head. And it still feels like the most haunting thing that I've ever had to do was nod my head and make eye contact for them to disconnect him from life support. And it only took a few minutes for him to stop, for his heart to stop, and that's when they called time of death. And we had to leave the room, and they gave us these blankets that some people make for people who are losing loved ones. And it was all like I felt like a zombie. They gave me papers, and they were asking what we wanted to do with the body and all of these things. And it's like there was a time when I was his wife that I would have been the person, but then I'm not the person. And so having to call his sister, who is his medical, whatever that word is. And, you know, do you want an autopsy? Do you want all these things? It's the beginning of what I call the death chores that have to happen after someone dies. And they don't wait. They don't go away just because you're grieving and emotional. There's decisions that have to be made. There's, you know, do we want cremation? Where do we want the body to go? All of these things need to be decided. There isn't room to just shut down and curl up into the fetal position, even though that's what you wanted to do. And
a few of my other guests have talked about this too, when someone passes away or some event happens to you and you go to the gas station, you know, you're low on gas, you go and you're just in this zombie state and you look around and people are smiling. They're going about their day. They're laughing and you're like, how dare you? It's just this bizarre feeling of, don't you know what just happened?
Yeah.
You know, and it really makes you, I think, be more compassionate to other people. When you see someone flip you off or, you know, they drive way too fast, you're like, they just went through something.
Yeah.
And that's
you don't
okay.
know.
You know, you never know. So, yeah.
Oh, I remember being mad at the mail person for driving down the road. Like time is just continuing to go on when it feels like it stopped for me. That was that, and the cherry trees blossoming after Evan died were two big things where I was like, how is that even happening? Because I felt like I was in a time warp, and it was the same after Scott died. It was, you know, we drove home that day, and the first questions the kids asked we've always been very open, and they're nothing off limits in conversation with them. They said, what's going to happen to his truck? And because they had spent so much time in that truck with him, and it was a process, but I figured out how to keep it. Got a loan, bought it from the bank, all the things. And then they said, what's going to happen with his body? And so then we talked about that. And then we drove back to Bellingham. One of the things that they loved to do with their dad was get takeout and go to, we call it Dad Park. I don't even know what the actual name of the park is, but it's on Marine Drive, kind of near the train tracks, and it overlooks the water. It's not a huge park, but they used to go there, get takeout, climb the trees. and so we did that, and we sat looking over the water and just talking about him. And I remember, you know, Oliver was still usually sleeping with me, and he cried himself to sleep that night. It was just the new reality of someone being gone. And then, you know, my job was to protect them, and to, at least that's what I felt was my job, was to facilitate the processing of their grief and to insulate them as much as I could from the death chores and the other sides of things, so that they could work through missing him. And man, it was terrifying for me though. I had been on COVID unemployment because with the kids in COVID school, and because Scott, his job was more important, and I was kind of in a weird space. I'd been trying to start a consulting thing that I just completely scrapped when Evan died. But that September 1st was when the COVID unemployment ended. Oh, wow. And I had been in talks with another company about going to work for them as a project manager. And there was no way in hell I could do any justice to that job. But it was terrifying because I also had no income. And our home was mostly covered with rent, but it was like, it was scary. And so his sister and I were working together to kind of get through all of the death chores, and we hadn't really had a relationship in years. And so there was this kind of redeveloping trust between us that needed to happen. It was, I think that one of the hardest things was that he was in a rental, and they obviously wanted to be able to rent it again. They were pretty kind to us about it, but we ended up having to move him out quickly on Thanksgiving weekend, which was also my birthday weekend.
Oh.
But yeah, kind of takes me back to all of that. It was, we tried to have a memorial that fall too, and the day that it was scheduled for, a couple days before that, were the huge floods that happened that year. And we ended up calling it off and postponing it. We ended up postponing it a couple times because there was like a COVID upsurge and whatnot. But having to gather people and move him out of his home, it was one of the most vivid memories I have was his work boots by the door. And it's weird going through someone else's life anyway after they die. But my ex-husband, my ex-husband who had moved on and loved other people after me and lived life where our life once was the same life, he had all of these different ones, and I'm looking at it in ways that I'm not supposed to, but I remember finding this little box that had our wedding rings in it in this little drawer that his wedding rings, like I have mine, but I just, and seeing little, there was this little necklace hanging by the door, and it had all 4 of our names on it, and it was kind of nice to see the little remnants of our life that he still had in his,
At what point in all of these experiences was it always in the back of your head that you maybe wanted to do this for a career, grief counseling to help people, or how did that come about? Really, it's something I just decided in the last few months. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're woo-woo though. Like, was there a sign of like, this is what you need to do?
Was there? I don't know.
Okay.
I think I just, I started thinking about it, and then I started thinking about it more, and then I started looking into what it would take, and really just kind of sitting with it. There wasn't like some big, woo-woo sign or anything like that, but it's anytime that I shared my stories or my experience with grief, I found that it was helpful to people, and that I have this experience of going through loss, and maybe a different way of looking at it than some. It kind of like what I shared with Evan's death is we were supposed to learn something from each other, and I was supposed to be there with him and help make his transition something peaceful, and I don't know what it all means, but and why have I had so much really strange loss in this short period of time, and so I think it's just kind of a culmination of experiencing all of that and realizing that that is a way that I might be able to help others process and go through things.
You sent me a book that has what part of your story in it?
Oh, so that's a piece of a chapter of my memoir. It was a writing course that I took And everyone had a little piece in an anthology.
And so you're working on your memoir right now.
I am. Yeah.
And what's our progress on here? Can we say a percentage?
Oh, like maybe a third at most.
Do you feel like it keeps growing? The more you write, you're like, oh yeah, and then this, and then this.
Well, I think it's kind of, I'm just writing it chronologically, and then it's going to break up into different stories. Like the Evan piece is going to be its own story. But the one that is included in that book is, it has to do with my early relationship with Scott, our marriage, divorce, and then my PCT hike, which was kind of a big part of figuring out who I was. I had been married my entire adult life, and so I'm single at 36 for the first time as an adult ever. And so it's kind of back and forth between memory and present day, which was my through hike. So that part that I shared was one of the memories that has to do with my early relationship with Scott. So
do you have, because I talk to a lot of musicians about putting music out, and some are very hesitant. And I said, hey, give yourself a deadline. That always helps me. Like, tell someone, my book is going to be released on this day or this year. Do you have any kind of timeline? Are you just going to play it by ear?
I don't have that, but what I am doing is putting some smaller essays and pieces of writing up on my Substack, which I am just about brave enough to share. Right now it's just some pieces of the chapters that I've written, and a bunch of eulogies. I've written a lot of eulogies, but they're good.
Yeah,
I think.
I love that. I'm good at eulogies.
I am really good at eulogies.
Well, I know a lot of people have been dying for this part, and I wasn't sure what we were going to get to, but I really love that we really focused on Scott.
Yeah.
I don't know. As we were going, I was like, this is what we're supposed to do. And as I mentioned before, I went through, a lot of stuff the last year, and I feel like a lot of stuff you said really like resonated with me. So if this podcast is for anyone, I think it was for me. So thank you.
Well, good.
I love you.
I love you too so much.
Let's go upstairs, have a weird hug.
Okay.
And then we'll have part 3 at some point.
Okay.
Let's not wait a year. But the fans are demanding it already. I can hear my friend Mo going, you need more. You need more.
Well, there's at least one more dead boyfriend to talk about. So
tune in for part 3.
And one who was brave enough to take me on after.
I want to talk about
this.
the current guy. Yes. I love running into you at parties and hearing about
it's pretty great.
Hearing about things. And you look very happy, by the way.
I am.
Yes. Thank you for coming over, Cheryl.
Thank you.